Well, all I wanted to do with this channel is roast crazy social justice warriors, make fun of how Marvel Comics and our beloved hobbies were dying, but I keep getting thrust into covering these big-brained topics I am not really comfortable or equipped to cover, but so many of you reach out, and it kind of feels like I should be doing it. It kind of feels like a bigger calling. Crazy people will always be around to make fun of. So this week we've had a lot of serious topics, whether it what's going on with Tommy Robinson or the crazy stuff going on with Elon Musk. Now we have Article 13 in the EU, which essentially destroys fair use and has crazy things in it like link taxes, like paying a tax to link to other content to use as sources in your own investigative or transformative content. Now, this may sound insane. The title of this video writes itself. I don't even have to think of something sensational. It is literally a precedent that kills fair use and is a frightening thing to consider if this passes in the next couple of weeks, and there's very little time for people to get involved. So what is it? Well, it's Article 13, and it is being looked at in the EU Parliament, I believe. And it's what probably started out as some way to combat wholesale copyright, just straight up copying other people's content up. But it is morphed into something far, far scarier. So on May 25th, according to edri.org, the European Council agreed to a negotiating position on a draft copyright directive. This will allow the presidency of the Council to start negotiations with the European Parliament on mass monitoring internet uploads and a chaotic new ancillary copyright measure that will make it harder to link to and quote news sources. Despite a large number of demands from a wide variety of different stakeholders, including EDRI, which is an organization around protecting digital freedom, as well as the Copyright for Creativity organization, to keep working on the text in order to create some semblance of balance. The Council decided to finalize its position with the flawed text. This position, as well as the mandate to the Council to negotiate, was voted against by Germany, Finland, Netherlands, Slovenia, Belgium, Hungary. Now, basically, it's the European Parliament's turn to adopt its negotiating position. The Legal Affairs Committee of the European Parliament is voting on the 20th and the 21st of June to agree on their standpoint. But there is still time. If you're in the United States, think of this as the battle for net neutrality, but even bigger. And I'm going to explain why it's important, not just to members, people of my subscribers that live in the EU, but people everywhere. This proposal chooses to ignore the limitations and exceptions to copyright, fundamental freedoms, and existing user practices. In addition, the proposal also fails to establish clear rules with regard on how citizens can use protected work in transformative ways, such as remixes and other forms of so-called user-generated content. As a result, a system of this kind will greatly restrict the way Europeans create, share, and communicate online. Basically, this kills fair use. Why is it important to everybody, not just in the EU? Well, we all consume content from content creators, and I'm just talking about content creators right now. This goes nothing into how this affects huge companies like GitHub and businesses in the EU, because this actually extends to sharing code, things like that, anything that contains links or content that the users do not own solely. So as consumers of content, as people that buy services from the EU, this increases costs to everything. As people that rely, there are those of us that rely on independent reporting, independently run blogs for information. Now, those people will simply not be able to afford to pay whatever absurd taxation there's going to be on links. This means that you cannot provide sources in the content that you cover for your news channel. You cannot write articles that use source material, or at least you cannot link it. So without paying some sort of fee, yes, a link tax. I'm not making that up. And again, this matters to not just people in the EU. If we want fair and balanced reporting from independent sources on the happenings in the EU, a la Tommy Robinson, if we want music remixes, hell, even memes to continue to flow, this is an issue that you need to dig into a little bit. Just some of the things that it's going to affect will be, I mean, literally, sites like Reddit, discussion forums, platforms, parodies, art, your ability to remix content in any way will now be at risk because essentially you'll be breaking the law if you don't pay for these things. And it's crazy. It's so crazy to me. Like, I try to report on things right now. I'm using a wide variety of websites. If I was doing this video under these new laws, I couldn't even link to the source information. I would just you just have to take my word for it, which is absurd. GitHub put out an article today about upload filters. So essentially, content that gets uploaded will now have to go through what looks like a content ID system. And if you know how cancerous the YouTube content ID copyright system is, imagine if this was made by your government, okay? Privacy. Upload filters are a form of surveillance, effectively generally monitoring any content that you might share. It suppresses free speech, requiring platforms to monitor content, contradicts intermediary liability protections. The EU law incentivizes people to then remove content. It's also completely ineffective. Content detection tools, as we know, are inherently flawed. Nobody has a really good system out there. It'll generate false positives and all sorts of other issues that people just aren't going to be prepared for. And what's going to happen is the big companies like YouTube or GitHub or Reddit, they're probably just going to have to block the EU. I don't see that. I don't know how they could exist without allowing people to link, without controlling them. I mean, if you post something on Reddit, is a little like British police officer going to pop up and say, "Oi, you got a license for that link, mate?" That was kind of Aussie, I guess. When it comes to coding, software developers who create copyrightable works, their code, and those who choose an open source license want to allow their code to be shared. False positives are likely to create for software code because code often has many contributors and many layers. So when you see a lot of code, there are often things that look very similar, or there are things that are the same for everybody, right? Like a submit form, like a web form or something like that. It's going to look the same for everybody. Well, how do we tax that? How do we police that? Requiring code hosting platforms like GitHub to scan and automatically remove content will drastically increase costs for software developers and ultimately the end user. This whole situation is insane. Another article talks about, on the topic of copyright, you now have a chance to have an influence. Okay, in stark contrast to the GDPR, which kind of sprung on everybody. I know I have clients in Europe, and the last 2 weeks have been very hectic. Experts near unanimously agree that the copyright reform law, as it stands now, is really bad. Where in the case of the GDPR, the EU institutions pushed through many changes against the concerted lobbying efforts of big business interests. In the copyright reform, they are about to give them exactly what they want. This essentially is a solution to, I don't know what, controlling literally everything anybody does. And what this does is it gives, it helps mainstream media, as I would view it, right? Big companies, they're the only ones that are going to be able to pay. So essentially, only mega huge news organizations will be able to pay whatever fees or taxes that would be imposed to simply link your sources or to use any other content under fair use. What it means is you cannot provide sources for your coverage as a news channel. You can't write articles. You can't use source material, or at least you can't link to it. And this is insanity. I can't imagine a world where I mean, it's totalitarian. It's insanity, and I don't really know any other way to word it. I mean, if you look at why this should matter to people not in the EU, for example. Obviously, if you're in the EU, you're paying attention. But if you're not in the EU, think of the precedent that this is going to set, where you have all content getting posted to the internet, having to go through some content ID system that will obviously, of course, just like the YouTube system, will have no way of knowing how it works or what reasoning there'll be for things that get flagged. And this is where spreading this news, spreading the message is important. There's only a few days until the vote on this. And the best site I could find was saveyourinternet.eu. And this is a site that makes it really easy to email your MEP. You can call. Obviously, I would say a phone call is probably more effective if you're able to get them on the phone. And you can tweet them. There's a lot of information under the hashtag #deleteart13. I think they should have went with delete article 13. That's just me. Or hashtag save your internet. I mean, if you look through the site, you can find the European Commission and the Council want to destroy the internet as we know and allow big companies to control what we see and what we do online. Should Article 13 of the Copyright Directive proposal be adopted, it would be imposed widespread censorship of all the content you can share online. The European Parliament is the only one that can step in and save your internet. What they say is contact members of your European Parliament before June 20th and tell them you need your copyright laws to protect your internet, and an internet where you can share news and culture with your friends and family, where you can expect to be treated fairly, and where your rights as an EU citizen are protected. Again, why is this important even to people not in the EU? Is because if something like this gets put into place, so as a content creator, for example, I don't know how this is going to affect people's ability to send me articles, people's ability to consume my content, people's ability to share my content. What does it mean to tweet out somebody else's video? Are you going to have to pay a tax for that? I'm very curious on how this is going to work, but what we do know is companies like YouTube aren't going to screw with it. They're just going to delete first and ask questions later if they ever even care. So take some time, research what's going on in Article 13. This is pure insanity. Check out the website, reach out to government officials if you can. It doesn't affect just those in the EU, but the entire world, because we all consume the content. We are all part of the global marketplace for development, for example, for different IT products, different products that we enjoy to consume. Some of it free, some of it we pay for. There's going to be a real cost to this, and the only people that can pay that cost are people that are not trustworthy, in my opinion. Check out the website, and please, I know a lot of people in the EU follow this channel, so if you share this video under that hashtag, maybe it will help people, or if you know people that need to know what's going on. You can't let this vote pass without making your voice heard. This is another one of those situations where I talked about the other day with Tommy Robinson, like, yes, it's important to share it out on social media and, share it on your Facebook and talk about it, talk to people while you're at the pub. And these things are important, but also taking that extra step to pick up the phone, to write an email will make a difference. And it's just a few extra minutes of time, and hopefully this can get completely shot down. And always be watching, pay attention, because if it loses once, it may come up again. So you have to be aware of this sort of thing. In the United States here, it's difficult to know when net neutrality stuff's coming up unless it's like the vote's in a week and everyone's in a panic to save net neutrality. Here, same thing in the EU. I believe this sort of thing is on purpose. With less than 30 days to the vote, surprise, surprise, now everyone has to scramble and get this bill shot down.